Hello and welcome to HomeKit Insider. This is your host, Stephen Robles. Andrew is away this week, but don't fret, because we have a wonderful returning guest, Jennifer Tuohy from The Verge. Thanks so much for coming on, Jennifer.
Hi, Stephen. Always a pleasure. Always happy to be here.
So fun. And Jennifer, if you watch on YouTube, youtube.com/HomeKit Insider, she has a pile of boxes, not only behind her, but is also hiding piles elsewhere. I mean, this rivals Andrew and I's HomeKit boxes around. That's amazing. Are these devices you still have to test? Do you have to set these up?
Some of the boxes are empty. Some of them I'm still working on getting set up. But my life is a constant cycle of set up, uninstall, repeat, test, go on. It just everywhere. Every available outlet in my house and some is full of smart gadgets. A lot of plugs at the moment. So many plugs, because that's like the one thing that works with Matter. So many smart plugs.
There was literally news this week that unveils released another Matter plug, but I can't. I mean, I just can't keep. Do you have it back there?
Somewhere in there.
Somewhere in there. I can't keep talking about plugs. I mean, Matter sure is exciting, maybe, but yeah, enough plugs. Now, because you cover smart home for The Verge, but it's not just HomeKit. You cover all the smart home.
I cover all of them, which is why there's a lot to test.
Right. So I'm curious, do you have like your actual Apple Home that you use for your personal stuff as you're walking around your house and not working, and then do you have like separate home setup, or do you just kind of shove everything into the main home that you work and just deal with it?
Pretty much that one. I have tried to do separate things, but you just, you don't get the full experience if you're just sort of siloing things. Like when I first started Matter testing, I created a room in all my compatible Matter apps that was my Matter room that I was trying to use to kind of feel that out a little bit in each ecosystem. But ultimately that didn't work, siloing things, because you also want to know how they work with everything else. And also my everyday life is testing. Even when I'm not working, I'm still testing. So I run my smart home through currently 4 different platforms. And it's
Apple Home, Google, Amazon. What's the 4th?
Stephen.
Wait a minute. I mean, we're HomeKit Insiders. I have no. Wait a minute. I really have, no. Wait. But you mean like you're not counting Matter as a platform, are you?
No.
What is that?
This is a Galaxy made by one of the largest electronics manufacturers in the world that also has a platform.
Wait a minute. No. Wait, Samsung has their own bespoke smart home platform?
Smart things.
I mean, that's like, I don't even count that.
And it works with Matter. And then I've also got a Home Assistant thing that I'm working on setting up. So yeah, lots of platforms. But this is why I'm so personally excited for Matter, because the idea ultimately is I should be able to use everything in all of the platforms at the same time with no issues. Should.
Okay, then let's just jump right into it, because iOS 16.5 is coming out most likely this week as our listeners hear this and watch this. The release candidate was last week. And so Thread 1.3 is one of the big changes on the back end for this, and it will enable iPhone users to add Matter devices to things like the Google Home app, which has been redesigned. We just had Google I/O last week. We'll talk about that in a moment also. And so if you have a HomePod Mini, an Apple TV 4K, I think 2nd gen or newer, you'll now be on Thread 1.3, which, again, for most people, you're not going to see any kind of visual difference. But it means you can add Matter to whatever smart home platform you want from your iPhone. Does that sound right? I know you had a whole article on this.
So, yes, although it's not necessarily to do with Thread at this point, the biggest thing that's happening that I understand that's happening with 16.5 is that Google Home app will have support for onboarding Matter devices on iPhones and iOS devices. Because up to this point, if you were using Google Home to add Matter devices to your home, you had to use an Android phone. So I had actually recently set up a Matter device, Matter Smart Plug, and it was I wanted to try adding it to Google Home first and then to Apple Home. And so I used a Pixel phone to scan it with the Google Home app, and then I could pair it from Google Home to Apple Home, but I had to write down the code or scan a QR code that the Home app on the Pixel generated. Now, in theory, as as of next week, when 16.5 arrives, I should be able to add it directly to Google Home using my iPhone. And then if I want, I could pair it to Apple Home and vice versa. So if you add it to Apple Home, you can then pair it directly to Google Home just using one phone. And in all my testing of Matter devices so far, one of my number one complaints has been I have to use two phones to get everything to work together. And this is not an experience that's a good one for the smart home. Although one of the promises of Matter is if you have a two-phone household, now you can all control your devices. And there are households like that. But ultimately, if you have a two-phone household, someone is probably the one setting everything up, and they just have one phone. So exactly. They don't want to use two.
Right.
So that's going to be a big change. And Alexa, sorry, I interrupt. Alexa also works with Matter as of last week on iOS. So all the platforms now work on your iPhone, including that one by that little company that you'd never heard of.
I mean, I don't know if we've ever met. No, Andrew mentioned smart things because I think he has like a washer and dryer that he can see the status of from his phone. But what's interesting now is like if you want to use multiple smart home platforms or whatever, iPhone is really the only one that you can do it all.
Yes.
Because you can now use the entire Google Home ecosystem, Amazon's whole ecosystem, and of course you have HomeKit and Apple Home. And you can't do that on Android because obviously HomeKit and Apple Home is not available there. So if you want the most flexibility in your smart home, actually iPhone is the most. It has the most access.
Wow, that's an angle I hadn't gone to. Yes, that is true. The iPhone is the one that works with all the platforms. That is true. Yes, and so ultimately you can now, if you want to use any platform, you can also use the iPad, obviously, to control your home, even if you don't use Apple Home, which is definitely a thing. I think there are a lot of people out there that have iPhones, but that use different smart home platforms other than Apple Home, mainly because Apple Home has been quite limited to date with the products that were available. But again, this is the other promise of Matter. And I think one of the main reasons Apple has been so bullish on Matter is it will bring a lot more devices that are compatible with Apple Home to Apple Home users. You've got so many smart plugs now.
And that's just what I was going to say. You know, as a 100% HomeKit only user, for me personally, Matter is still not a huge benefit. You know, I have more options for smart plugs, but I also wasn't really scrambling for that before. You know, I have Eve, I have Wemo, Maris, SwitchBot actually has a HomeKit smart plug, and so I wasn't really needing more plug options. And aside from that one type of product, at least in this first version of Matter, I don't know. I still don't see a HomeKit user benefiting from Matter a whole lot. And that's also why, like, I have a bunch of Eve devices that supposedly have a Matter upgrade available. Like, I can make these devices Matter, but that's really no benefit to me as a HomeKit user. And I also hear, like, Andrew tried it and it started getting a little buggy. So I don't know. I'm curious if pretend you are a HomeKit first and only user. I mean, how much does Matter really matter still, even at this point?
So it's twofold. One, going back to your initial question about Thread, which I will get to. And then the other is the products. So I'm going to reach over to my pile of boxes.
There you go. Jennifer is reaching back. A pile of
So I actually just bought these. Can you see these? So these are Lincoln Wi-Fi smart light bulbs that work with Matter.
Okay.
And they were, I want to say $40, maybe a bit less.
How many?
For four.
Oh, that's pretty good. That's pretty
full
good.
color.
Okay.
And this is not the traditional Apple Home experience, like, you know, when you unbox a nice nano leaf bulb and it comes in a nice box. And this is like, you know, from buying bulbs from Home Depot kind of box.
Those are like dumb bulb boxes.
Yeah, dumb bulb boxes. But they all have a Matter code on. So, you know, lighting, there are good lighting options in Apple Home, but most of them are expensive. I have not tried these out. I am not endorsing them right now. I'm just saying I'm going to try these out because I just finished reviewing the nano leaf lights, which I love and which are inexpensive comparatively. But these are regular light bulb prices, you know, and if you can, that's the benefit I think that Apple Home users are going to have, assuming these types of products are decent and work well and are not just, you know, right. But if they have the Matter logo, they should have all the security elements that, you know, Apple Home users are accustomed to, security, privacy, all of that. So I think that's going to be good for Apple Home users. I think that's going to take a while, though, but I think you'll see those benefits in terms of your much broader choice. Also, different device types, because Apple Home to date has been quite limited in its device types. And even when they add new device types, quite often you find that they don't really do a lot yet. So right. I think, I know robot vacuums are one that we're kind of looking forward to. Yes. There'll be a much broader option, hopefully, for different device types as Matter increases its device types, because right now it's still quite limited.
Roadmap, right? Like there's no timeline for the next version of Matter.
There is. So the next version of Matter is spring, which is what I feel like we're in spring right now. It's pretty hot here in South Carolina.
We're in the middle of May.
So I think we will hear about the next version of Matter very soon, in the next weeks. But whether there are devices in that, whether there are device types in that, or whether it's just polishing, because, this is 1.1. So that the 1.1 release can often be kind of, we're going to fix everything that didn't work in 1. I would, though, if you're really waiting on new device types, I would have thought the fall is probably the next. They said they're going to have biannual release cadences for Matter. So there'll be a spring and a fall update. So I would have thought by fall, you're likely to see some more device types. But I think this is one thing that has been frustrating about Matter, but ultimately it's probably a good thing. It's been very slow.
I mean, the initial launch was like glacier slow, and just kept being put off and put off. I'm curious, because you test so many different Matter devices, as far as like bugginess and reliability, because I have just very few. Like I have a smart plug, and then I got the SwitchBot Hub 2, which is a Matter hub, and actually adds those SwitchBot devices to the home. And I've contacted them. I think they're working on it. But there's some weirdness there where I have some blinds that in the SwitchBot app, it gives me the 3 stages of open up and then fully open and then open down, if you have those kind of slat style blinds. But in the home app, it only shows open and closed. So there's not like a one-to-one of the controls. And so I can't really use it in the home app, because if I try to open it, it doesn't know which of the 3 stages it is. And so it'll just keep going back and forth, open, closed, and it's not reading it properly. So what has your experience been as far as reliability and or bugginess with Matter devices?
So I think that's not so much bugginess as that the spec doesn't support that middle point of your shade. And I think that might be the type of thing we're going to get more of with 1.1. I think, the existing devices and the way they interact will hopefully... we'll see some more improvements. I haven't tested the tilt blinds. I've tested the SwitchBot curtain opener. And I found that to be pretty accurate, like open, close, but it only has the 2 options. And most of the devices I've tested, like smart plugs, are just on, off.
Right, exactly.
So there hasn't been a lot of, though the light bulbs, you can change color and dimness using Matter. And I have found some discrepancy between apps. So like if I will do the way you control, say, the nanoleaf light bulbs in Apple Home versus using it in Google Home, slightly different. But one thing that I have noticed universally that has been good with Matter, and Thread in particular, to go back to Thread, is that it's instant no matter which app I'm using. So there's no lagginess, there's no delay. And I'll like line up my phones and I will press on in Apple Home, and I will see on the smart things and the Google Home app, immediately it turns on in those ones as well, like immediately. So that, because it's all happening locally, it's all using Thread. And this is, again, something that HomeKit users are used to. However, Thread was limited and has been limited for a while for Apple Home users. And now we're seeing more and more Thread devices. So that new unveils plug that you just mentioned is a Thread plug, not a Wi-Fi plug. Right. So that's the difference. And that is where I'm feeling most excited about Matter, because it is Thread. Because the biggest problem with the smart home to date, I think, is so much relying on 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi, too much sort of not great software experiences with these devices, so constantly dropping offline. One device, one app will see them, the other app won't. There's a lot of confusion in the back end because a lot of it's happening in the cloud. Whereas now with Matter and Thread, it should all just be working locally in your home, and that is the ultimate goal. That's when we're going to get to a point where the smart home just works.
It just works. And, I built the house last year, and, our listeners followed that saga. Well, now, I had to buy a bunch of switches pre-Thread really becoming pervasive. And so I have a lot of Wemo switches. No shade to Wemo and Belkin. They couldn't just give me a bunch of pre-launch switches. I get it. But those are Wi-Fi, and it's just a pain in the neck. I have this one automation in my master bathroom where if I turn one switch off, it will turn everything off. Because typically when you're leaving the bathroom, you're going to turn everything off. And so it's just a nice, quick automation. Love doing that. But for some reason now, that one switch, when I turn it off, it takes a full minute for the rest of the lights to respond. And it's not always like that. Like if I do a factory reset, re-add it, and then redo the automation, it'll work fine. But it's just annoying. And I do have some Wemo Thread switches, and those are much better. I do have to say, I feel like every device I measure against the Lutron speed and reliability, because Lutron is just so spot on, rock solid.
Do you know why that is?
I mean, it's their hub, they got the whole,
and because their hub uses a proprietary protocol in your home that only it uses, so it can just chat really easily to itself.
It's so good, though.
But you will notice issues if you're trying to use it with other devices, because then it's using the cloud. So, like you can integrate Ecobee with your Lutron. And so they're great when you're just using Lutron. And for a home, if you've got smart switches, it does make a lot of sense to just stick with one brand. But ultimately, what's so good about Lutron is what's going to be so good about Thread and Matter, because it's all working locally on a dedicated smart home protocol. All the other smart home protocols were not designed as smart home protocols. They were designed for other use cases and kind of co-opted into being used for the smart home, with the exception to some extent of Zigbee and Z-Wave, but their issues is they have a single point of failure, which is their bridge or hub. Right. Thread uses multiple bridges, and it does use bridges, the border routers, but multiple ones. So if you have 5 Thread border routers and one drops offline, your home will still keep working. If you have one Hue bridge or one Lutron bridge and one drops offline, nothing is going to work anymore. So that's
like the bulbs you have, those LinkedIn the LinkedIn bulbs.
Such a good name.
Those are not Thread, right?
No. Matter. So this is what I'm excited to sort of delve into in the next few months as we get more of these devices, is how well, and this is one of the main reasons I bought these bulbs, how well does Wi-Fi work over Matter in your home versus how well does Thread work over Matter? Because the Wi-Fi in your home over Matter is local. It's using your local area network. It's not going to the cloud. It's Wi-Fi, but it's not internet. So I'm interested to see how that works. I've been wanting to try. I tried to test it out with Wiz, who recently announced that its bulbs were Matter ready, but unfortunately the ones I have, I guess, are not part of that update yet. So I'm still waiting. So yeah, I'm interested to. That's going to be a sort of test to see whether Wi-Fi Matter works just as well as Thread Matter. My guess is Thread Matter is going to probably edge it out, because Wi-Fi is still very congested, 2.4 gigahertz, especially in my house. But to your initial question 20 minutes ago about 1.3, this is a big issue for Thread. And it's a problem that I do not see getting solved next week, even though it sounds like it will be. 1.3 was actually announced a while ago, and I wrote a big article about it when it was first announced. And it's basically the ability for Thread border routers from different manufacturers to communicate with each other. Not all devices that are Thread border routers had been updated to 1.3 yet, and Apple's, it sounds like, are going to be next week, according to sort of rumors. I don't think there's been any official confirmation. So in theory now, any other border router in your home should be able to communicate with your Apple border routers. So right now, if you get a Thread device and you add it to your home using the new Google Home app, and you have a Nest Hub and an Apple TV in your house, which is quite a feasible combination, and you're using your iPhone to do it, the bulb that you add, like nano leaf bulb, say, will connect to your Google Nest Hub Thread border router network, that Thread network. And your Apple Thread network will sit on its own, and perhaps, say, if you've added an Eve plug to your Apple Home, your Eve plug will be on that Thread network. So you'll have 2 competing Thread networks. they can still talk to each other. So your Nanoleaf bulb could still talk to your Eve plug using Matter. Right? So that's not an issue. It's not that they won't communicate, but if your Nest Hub gets unplugged, your Eve plug's still going to work. Your Nanoleaf bulb will not, because you're not sharing the Thread border router, right? The threads and the two networks are not sharing border routers. I'm doing a nice little dance here with my hands for anyone watching the video.
Watch this episode to really get the diagram here.
So ultimately, that loses one of the big benefits of Thread, which is this mesh network with no single point of failure. If you only have one Nest Hub Max, then and you unplug that for some reason, your light won't work. Once 1.3 is here and all the Thread border routers can talk to each other, if you unplug your Nest Hub Max, your Apple TV will pick up the slack, and both your devices will keep working. But that's not but from what I understand, that is a complicated back-end process that all the different manufacturers have to get together and share Thread credentials in order for it to work. It also has to be in the operating system. So Google and Apple, their OSs have to support Thread credential sharing, which I believe they do currently. But the hubs also, so like your SmartThings hub from that little company, set up that, and then you, for some reason, decide you want a Nest Hub Max, it should join your network. And this is another thing that makes Matter, difficult for you and I, but interesting for most people. It's more designed for people that are just getting into the smart home. Like, it's going to help you set up and go forward. Trying to shoehorn existing smart homes into Matter and Thread is a little more complicated.
Right, because to be clear, like from a practical standpoint, if someone wanted to get a Nest Hub Max to control their smart home, if they had all Matter devices, that would work, and then you should also be able to use like the Apple Home app, and like everything I think should be okay. But if you have a Matter controller like the Nest Hub Max, and you have an older HomeKit device that is not updated with Matter, let's say like the Eve light strip, like that's not going to show up, right? Like you're not going to see all your HomeKit devices on a Google Nest Hub Max. You'll only see Matter devices.
Correct.
And so it seemed like if you were starting a smart home today, and you could, even though there's not as many Matter devices like possible to do this, if you got all Matter devices today, then you could say, maybe I'll use my Google Nest Hub Max to control it. Maybe I'll use an iPad sitting on the kitchen table. Like, that's the dream. Use any controller you want. But if you have a full HomeKit home like me, and I buy a Nest Hub Max, the only thing that's going to show up is my Matter plug that I have. Like, that would be it. That'll be it. So
yeah, you're not going to be able to retroactively sort of bring all your Apple Home devices to control from your Nest Hub Max. No, that is not going to happen. So what needs to happen instead is that Apple comes out with its own nice smart home controller, just like that new Pixel tablet.
That's a great transition. Let's actually, because as our audience listens and watches this, last week was Google I/O. There was a bunch of announcements. The word AI was spoken 3,000 times. I think that was the actual count.
That first hour and 20 minutes. Woof.
Wow. I mean, listen, it is impressive what they're talking about. And we don't talk about Google a lot on this show, but I will give kudos the photo verification tools that Google is building in because of the rise of AI and AI generated images. Knowing what is an actual photo is going to be one of the biggest things. And
it's going to be a key. Yeah.
Yeah. Like years ago, it was funny, like early 2000s, social media was just getting started. The term was like pictures or it didn't happen. If someone wanted to know if an event was actually real, they were like, show me a picture. And I feel like today in 2023, it's like a picture almost means it is probably fake. Like any picture you see is AI generated, and it's like that term doesn't apply anymore. And Google announced during I/O that they're really going to work hard where when you see a photo, like a staged moon landing, this is the example they used in the keynote, they're actually going to surface all the times this particular image has been online. They're going to show different articles that talk about the image and kind of put it in context. And so kudos to Google for doing the work, at least, of trying to, stem the tide of this like AI generated content world. Like, because it's pretty wild out there.
Well, and they're the ones that have the tools to do that, and it's we really do need that. We need that context. Context is king, even in the smart home. Context is king. You need to know where it's come from.
And especially because Google search, as they showed, you're going to have a lot of just AI generated content at the top of your Google searches now before you ever see an actual link to a website. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be very far down the page. And so if all that top search result area is AI generated content, they really do need to make sure that they have the context for that and references. But anyway, I know this is not a Google search show, but it was a wild keynote.
Well, it's a big thing. It's changing the internet as we know it. So, and it will affect our home too at some point, the smart home. But I
am curious when AI will actually enter the smart home world, because when you add a device to Apple Home per se, you'll get like suggested automations. And, it'll say like, oh, do you want to turn off all the lights when you turn this one on or off, and that kind of stuff. And I think it would be an incredible step if AI can start working in that, Siri AI or whatever, where it like follows your usage patterns. And then, 2 months down the road of having a smart home, it suggests automations based on like your activity for, over time. And I think there's some really powerful things there possible for AI. Privacy and security notwithstanding, how does that work? I don't know. But
I don't know that Siri would ever get there, just because of the way that Apple has set up the privacy. It doesn't get your data in any way, but Amazon's voice assistant already has that function. It's called Hunches. I haven't had a lot of experience with it working very well, but it does. It will come up with suggestions for you, like, you normally turn your light off this time every night and you lock your door. Do you want me to set up an automation for you? And that kind of stuff is really useful. And like you say, Apple has it to some extent in the like setup stage. And I find that very useful too, even as a seasoned smart home setup person. I'm like, I don't want to have to go back into my automation and turn on another thing because I've added a new plug. I just want it to do it for me. But in terms of AI, like I think the most impactful will be in voice assistant. I think we will, our voice assistants will get a lot smarter once they're, have sort of some tailored, curated access to these LLMs, these large language models, to provide more context in the way when we communicate with them. So more natural language processing is feasible, I think, and also to be more proactive, because that's one thing the smart home has promised but hasn't really delivered is, the proactive smart home that does things for you rather than you having to ask. So I think there's a lot of interesting, and all of the big AI, all of the big companies are working on AI and incorporating it into their voice assistants. It's going to be very interesting to watch this space.
It is, because it is a funny contrast to hear all this amazing AI stuff, and then when my kids go into their bathroom to like play music because they're about to get in the shower and they try to get Siri to play anything, it's so dumb. Like, it really just does not get. Does not, like, they literally shouting at the HomePod Mini trying to get it to play anything. So that's the current state. But Google had some interesting updates to the Google Home app. It's completely redesigned, and this does affect iPhone and users because you can use the Google Home app on your iPhone. Total redesign, very Eastery. I feel like it's very pastel-y and like just very, very like flat stuff. I mean, it's fine, I guess. Have you gotten a chance to actually see or play with the new Google Home?
Yeah, I've actually been using it for a while because it's been in a preview for almost 7 months, public preview. So anyone could sign up, but you had to get an invite once you'd signed up. I think they said they had about 500,000 people on the preview, so it was quite big. It's strikingly similar to the Apple Home app, which I don't think is a bad thing. I mean, both the Apple Home, the Google Home, and Samsung SmartThings apps have very similar interfaces. The laggard here is the Amazon app, which is very different from everyone's. And I think it's good in a way to have this uniform. It's like, the light switch is the same everywhere. So maybe, having these apps, these control apps be similar, that learning curve is a lot less steep. Right. It has the same, like just like an Apple Home when it changed recently, and they changed the way you interacted with the on-off and the brightness for, say, a light or a switch. You tap to do one thing, you tap and hold to do another, and you can slide to brighten. That's how the Google Home One app works as well. And it has live view of your video when it opens up, just like the Apple Home app does, but only for certain cameras, just like Apple Home, which is another issue with all of these platforms, is we still can't use everything everywhere, which is where we need to get to once cameras are the big thing, I think. But the most interesting, I think, element of the new Google Home app is how it works with, well, the most interesting element for this audience is how it works with the new Pixel tablet, which is being very specifically not marketed as a smart display, but also has a lot of the same functions as, say, a Nest Hub or an Amazon's Echo Show smart display, which I know a lot of Apple Home users have been wanting for their own home, some version of. And it's interesting because the Pixel tablet is essentially using the same. I mean, it's like using an iPad, right? A lot of people use iPads to control their homes, but I used to have an iPad mounted in my wall. There's not a good solution for that from Apple yet, and I think a lot of people are hoping that we're going to get some kind of HomePod, iPad, home controller, and that's exactly what this Pixel tablet is, just from Pixel rather than Apple. So it's not going to work to control your Apple Home unless, as you discussed earlier, you moved everything's Matter, then you would be able to, because it does work with Matter. But it has a really neat interface where you just press a little button and it will open up a panel so you can control your favorite lights, locks, cameras. But the really key feature that I think Apple Home users will be feeling quite jealous about is multi-user interface. Yes. So the tablet can be used by multiple profiles. You don't have to switch profiles to use this home thing, but you can, you can have all your apps, and then your husband or your spouse could have all their apps, and your kid could have all their apps with different profiles. And this is something that Apple has sort of steadfastly refused to give us for years.
It's so frustrating because if you set up an iPad for education, there actually is ability to have multiple users on an iPad, but it has to be in this like classroom education setting.
Yeah.
And so that's existed for years. But multi-users on an iPad, yes, I still want. But I will say, so I have my iPad mini here, and this would just be ideal if there was some dock that used the smart connector that, I thought there was a smart connector on the iPad mini, but actually there's not. But if they put one on here and they made that dock that Google made, just to be able to put an iPad mini on the dock and then enter, I just started playing around with CarPlay because I got like a third-party device. And I don't know why I never knew this, but it's just the iPhone displaying something different. Like it's literally the iPhone running that content. And so to have something like Home Play, or I don't know, something where when you put the iPad on an Apple dock, it changes into that smart home and maybe like the photo thing. Because I have some friends with a Google Nest Hub, the smaller one. And it's just cool to see different pictures just scrolling on there all the time. I mean, it's like the 2023 digital picture frame. But then they can play music and they can ask Google different questions. And it would just be great. Just have this iPad mini on there and charging. Because I will say the iPad mini battery is still kind of meh. And so if this thing, is just charging all the time, I can run my smart home from it. Like you said, so many people have mounted iPads in their walls and in everywhere to control their smart home. I think it's just a huge opportunity. Google giving that little hub thing away too. I mean, it's $500 for the Pixel tablet and the little stand.
And the little stand, which is $129 separately. So like if you wanted to buy an extra one, and
Apple would probably be $200. It would be $200 if Apple sold it.
Well, and the stand doesn't do an awful lot, which I was kind of hoping it would do more. It's a speaker, but only when the Pixel tablet's docked. So once you take the tablet away, it's no longer a speaker. And I feel like they missed a bit of a trick there, and it does have potential. Like I know we've heard many rumors about a potential iPad HomePod, home display, home hub thing. And I feel like Apple probably has the potential to come in now right at the end of the whole life cycle of the smart display and come out with, okay, this is the best thing ever and we invented it. You know how they always do that?
Yes. Well,
everyone else has already tried and they didn't do it very well, and Apple can come in and say, this is how it's done. Look at this is great. It'll control your home, it'll work with your voice assistant, it will work with Matter, it will be a thread border router, and it'll have the perfect interface for controlling your home, but it won't be a tablet that your kid's going to run off and leave in the bathroom, because that would be my concern with this Pixel tablet as my home controller. If my kid is like, oh, I want to watch YouTube and it's disappeared and I don't know where it is, I mean, I feel like your home controller needs to be in one spot and stay there.
I agree. And if it was, so many people still want airport routers back, and I'd be down for that. But if that device was like Wi-Fi router, thread border router, home controller, like runs iCloud plus, private relay, so you have like privacy in your home network, I think it would be a popular device, even if it was just for the home control. Because I do see a lot of people with these little Nest hubs everywhere, like the Google hubs with the little screens. So,
well, and I'd love to know from your experience. I mean, because you have your Apple Home smart home set up exactly how you want it. How would you feel like you would use a smart display? Because I feel like smart displays have sort of fallen between 5 stools in the last year. Like, they have multiple functions and they don't really do any single one of them well. And home control is one. I mean, I know you probably haven't used a Nest Hub Max or a Echo Show much, but there is the option to like access a setting screens to control lights and locks, but it is not intuitive, it's not quick, and it's a lot of like scrolling, and ultimately they're just designed to be controlled by voice. Like, use your voice assistant to do what you want. But do you feel a need for a home control interface that you can touch and that everyone in your home can touch? Do you think is that something that's sort of missing for you?
I think I would prefer it because, again, like my kid, I have 3 kids, and they all yell at Siri to control the smart home. And I feel like if there was...
You've trained them well.
It's hilarious. My daughter is 6, and as she has been learning to spell, she realized she can ask Siri how to spell things. And so I think half of her English knowledge is going to be coming from Siri just spelling words to her. But it's been great. I mean, she's learned how to spell. But I do think, a display that is easy to use with big buttons that, I could customize to say, here's like the 5-6 scenes that we normally run if we're going to watch something, if it's nighttime, if it's morning. And if it would reduce some of that, like shouting to Siri over and over again, and it can just be, brought down to just a single tap, I would really prefer it. And I think this kind of device... 3 places. The kitchen, I think, would be a prime place for it. It's where I see people use their Google Nest hubs, the kitchen. It's the pictures, it's the music, it's recipes. I would love that. The end table in a living room where you could just reach over and run a scene, turn on the Apple TV from the little display. I think that would be great. And like the nightstand next to your bed, because you run the good night scene. Maybe you have a TV in the bedroom you can control from there, setting a mood from there. And so I do think there's some unique use cases, and I would use it 100%. I would put them and try to steer the kids towards just touch this once rather than shout 4 times. And let's see how that goes. I would be down for it.
Yeah. I mean, that has been a major sort of pain point, I think, for the whole smart home is control interfaces. I mean, voice is great. Voice really helped, but it is not always what you want to use. And smart buttons are great, except for you don't always know what's going to happen when you press them. Yes. Unless you're the person that set them up and programmed them and you have a very good memory, which I don't. So yeah, the interface is still a pain point because people are so used to one thing doing one thing, light switch turns off, So I'm hopeful that Apple's going to come in and show us all how to do it, but
yeah.
Well, I'm hopeful, but I don't know. We'll see.
The last thing I saw from the Google I/O keynote that I hope Apple adopts is you can access your cameras that are in your Google Home via the web. You can go to a website and see the live streams from all your cameras on a website. I would love that ability. And if you actually sign into iCloud.com today, there is actually like an HSV like menu selection. It does nothing. it just says like HSV cameras. Like there's no screen or menu that it goes to, but I would love to be able to click that and view all my HomeKit secure video cameras from the web and download recordings from there, because trying to download a recording from the Home app is a pain in the neck. And so just to be able to select like multiple clips, give me all the clips from this day, or just click one and download the file from the web, I'd 100%, I want that. So
yeah, that right now is actually still part of the preview, so not everyone can access that, but it's actually a holdover from Nest. Nest used to have that capability, still does, if you have the older Nest cameras, and it is great because you can easily manage your footage, and you can like view, like sort of a Blofeld person, sit in your desk and I'm surveying my domain. Yes. See all your cameras. And you can do it. You can do it on your TV. I guess the web part, though, obviously it's using the cloud, and you with Apple HomeKit Secure Video. I don't know. There's probably I'm guessing that element, adding that element, is an extra kind of security level that perhaps people might not want to use, because. Sure. We've seen, like with Eufy, being able to access things on the web, that caused a whole issue. Yes. I don't know, but it is a good convenience for sure. And I've used the Google Home version, and it works okay. It's not. I can see why it's still in the preview. There's some kinks to be worked out. And the Nest cams. I don't know if this is relevant for your audience, but it's quite exciting to me. They're finally bringing some of the old Nest cams into the new Google Home app. You've always been able to view them in the Google Home app, just live stream, but now you can actually you will be able to this summer access all the functions and features of your older Nest cams, which is kind of cool, because some of these cameras are 8 years old, and they're kind of now Google, which does have a great reputation for deprecating old products, is actually keeping these older cameras alive. I have one on the side of my house, one of the original Nest cams, and it's like, I don't want to take it down. It still works great. But I want to be able to use it in the new interface, and I will be able to. So I think that's a good move on their part. But yeah, one day maybe you'll be able to access your HomeKit secure video cameras on the web.
Do you think when cameras, my last question for you, when cameras eventually Matter supports cameras, and you'd be able to add a Matter camera to whatever smart home platform you want, do you think that Amazon and their Ring products would actually allow you to add that, like Amazon Ring doorbell via Matter, to the Apple Home app? Because my theory is, I feel like Amazon has such a foothold with the Ring doorbell. I mean, there's entire housing developments here in Florida that the Ring doorbell is just like thrown in as like a thing if you're building a new house, and like it's just the de facto thing. And I think that their that is a prime part of their ecosystem, that they don't want you to just be able to use their Ring camera in other apps. Do you think that when the day comes and Matter supports cameras, and you supposedly can add doorbell cams from any manufacturer via Matter to the Home app, do you think Amazon's going to play that? They're going to play that game?
No.
Yes, yeah, I agree. I don't think so either. Thank you. I don't think so. They're not going to let go of that. I mean, that's too big.
Prove me wrong, Ring.
It's too big.
Yeah, I mean, this is a question we hear a lot from manufacturers, and a question we put to manufacturers a lot. What's the benefit for us? Like, Lutron, to go back to, I've spoken to them a lot about Matter, and they're like, we're keeping an eye on it, but ultimately, we already do everything that our customers need us to do, so why should we be in Matter? But I think the one thing that would push a company like Lutron or would push Ring is customer pressure. Like, if customers say, I really want this to work with Matter, once Matter kind of gets a little bit more momentum, potentially Amazon is all in on Matter, but Ring has been incredibly quiet. So, obviously the Amazon's the big daddy there. So there's definitely potential, but I think at this stage, my answer is definitely no. I don't see Ring working with Matter and showing up in all the different apps. I mean, right now you can access Google Home cameras on. So you can access Ring cameras on Google Home devices. So Ring has sort of opened its ecosystem a little bit. is it that way around or is it the other way around? So you can view Google Home cameras in Amazon devices. That's it. You can't view Ring cameras on Google Home devices.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's the other way around. So Ring is very much keeping its ecosystem tightly closed and controlled. You can view them on Amazon devices, obviously Echo shows. But it does, Ring is becoming its own platform, its own smart home platform. Its app has a lot of integrations and functions and features that you don't normally find in just a smart security camera, like say an Arlo app, which is the security cameras and the security system. Ring has integrations with garage door controllers, with lights. I mean, you could technically run your smart home through your Ring app now, today. So Matter doesn't, if you're all Ring and all Amazon, Matter doesn't really, again, just like with Apple Home, doesn't really bring you anything except for the local element. The local control. So, yeah, I mean, right now, no. There is a future where it may make sense and Ring has to, and I would like that future to come sooner rather than later, but we're all still waiting.
It's such a
it's a journey.
I have people who will buy a home, and there's just a bunch of Ring stuff around. You know, there's a Ring doorbell already installed. They have a Ring floodlight. And I tell them, like, you could get HomeKit secure video cameras and not pay a monthly subscription, but you have to replace all of this. And they're like,
Well, you can also use Home Assistant and Hoobs, and you can go.
Yeah, but most average people, you lose them at Hoobs. They don't know what that is.
I know it is a shame, but yeah, ultimately, if you move into a home like that, it makes a lot of sense to use Ring for everything. Yeah, and Ring cameras are good. Like, they are good.
They're good. They are good. Amazon, that was a good play because Amazon purchased them, right? They were their own thing, and then that was a good,
I mean, obviously, there's been all the security and privacy issues, but show me a camera company that hasn't had those.
HomeKit secure video?
Not a camera company.
Fair enough.
And there are a lot of genuinely worrying privacy concerns there, but the hardware, the software, the experience using Ring devices and Ring cameras, Ring alarm, it is a good product. It's polished, and it works well. So yeah, I can understand why Apple Home users would like to be able to use those devices without jumping through hoops.
Sure. Well, Jennifer, I've taken up too much of your time. Thank you so much for joining at HomeKit Insider. Obviously, you write at theverge.com. Where can people go to find you, follow you?
So yes, Verge.com, and I am still on the Twitter site. I'm also on Mastodon and this Blue Sky thing.
Oh, okay. I'll follow you there. I didn't know. Yeah.
JP2E. I know. And LinkedIn. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn too. That's kind of a nice sort of feels like a good space, LinkedIn.
I think I have to put on a tie to open that app. Put on a tie, just to go in there and comment.
That's true. But yeah, the Verge.com is the place to go and find everything that I'm working on. And so yeah, and cool. Great to chat. Good to catch up, and hope Andrew didn't miss me too much.
Yeah, no, I'm sure you'll be back again. We'll put links to Jennifer's social media handles, Twitter, Mastodon, Blue Sky, all that is in the show notes. Jennifer, thanks again for joining us on HomeKit Insider.
Thank you. Bye.